Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad with Capitalism Hits Home, a show about the intersection and mutual shaping of personal life and economic and political and social life in the United States. This podcast is brought to you by Democracy at Work, a nonprofit organization devoted to bringing democracy at work to the United States, as well as bringing knowledge of what's happening that we don't hear about in our news. We hope that you'll be interested in the other programs, as well as the merchandise and whatever wisdom you find in Democracy at Work. So if you want to find those things, go to www.democracyatwork.info. And before I even begin, I want to thank you. Thank you for listening and watching. Thank you for being interested. And I want to hope that you share this show. You enjoy it, you share it, you write comments about what you think and what you'd like to see here. And if you're so moved, and we hope you are, you contribute money to our show, because unfortunately here in the great USA, we need money, like everyone else in America, except maybe Jeff Bezos and his ilk. In any case, welcome. I want to continue the discussion that I began last week about what is happening here as two greatly powerful institutions in America are failing. One is the economy, the American empire, and our dominance as it's replaced by the Chinese slowly. And the other is the dissolution of what was the stable American family of father, mother, and children, supported by the male wage of the white male in a country that was overwhelmingly white. Now, as I told you before, the divorce rate is now up to between the formal divorce rate is only 50%. The formal legal divorce and separation rate is 50%. But there's another 15 to 20% of people who just split because they don't have kids or monies to fight over. So that we're talking about a majority of marriages that end in separation or divorce, legal or extra-legal. And we're also talking about the other phenomenon, which is that the big trend among married couples is not having children. So that factor, that aspect of the nuclear family is also going down. Now, there's a lot of blaming going on. There's a right-wing sociologist with a best-selling book that was called Coming Apart, where he blames lazy, lustful, oversexed white men for abandoning their families and not wanting to be in a family. Of course, that's not true. 81% of American women are now single, and single by choice. They don't want to have a domestic job after their jobs in the marketplace, and they have to work because family wages don't exist anymore, particularly for blue-collar men. So Charles Murray and the right wing want to attribute that to the inherent lazy lustfulness of white men. And that's why they're shafted. That's very similar to the explanation of Patrick Moynihan in 1965, who blamed the weaker black family on the fact that black men are lustful and neglectful of children and don't work hard enough, lazy, lustful, and neglectful. The fact that black men never earned a family wage is something he never mentions. So this time now, blue-collar white men have joined their black brothers in being vilified and condemned as lazy, lustful, and neglectful people. There's no mention of corporate greed or racism. There's no mention about that when looking at how many American children are in poverty. 1 out of 8 U.S. kids goes hungry. Now, part of that is because the family has broken down and there's an increasing alternative family of a mother and children with little or no support. That's even bigger in the Black family, where Black men and women are denied the wages that white people have. So, in 2021, 22% of Black children went hungry, and 19% of Hispanic children went hungry because they suffered the same thing, lower wages. Of course, single families headed by one person, usually a mother, overwhelmingly a mother, actually, over 90%, women get paid less, and 24% of American households are now headed by women. Why? Well, corporate greed is again the culprit. It's the culprit because people are being paid poorly. The biggest employers in the United States are Amazon, Walmart, call centers, and fast food. Let's take fast food. 66% of fast food minimum wage workers are women, many women with children. So, of course, they can't stretch their budgets to accommodate children who are hungry and growing. They don't make enough money. One of the amusing, in a sardonic way, amusing stories from On the Clock, an excellent book by Emily Gindelsberger about the biggest jobs in the United States. She says she worked in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which is the most dangerous neighborhood in San Francisco. There's beggars all over the place. But she said as long as she wore her McDonald's uniform, no beggars ever hit her up. They figured quite properly that anyone working at McDonald's doesn't have an extra dime. So that one of the reasons kids go hungry is because so many of them are brought up by single mothers who don't get paid well, or by married mothers in terribly stretched households. I've said it before, but I'm so blown away by it that it's worth repeating that there is no city, no state, no county in the whole United States where 2 people working full-time can have a 2-bedroom apartment and afford it. So how do American people cope with this new reality where their basic emotional connection, particularly for men, the family is breaking up, and their basic American identity as the hegemonic group where you can get a good job, that's breaking up too? Well, people are protesting. Millions of people are on the street in movements that are separate, like Black Lives Matter, very important, or the climate extinction movement, fighting against the destruction of our planet by big corporate interests, making fossil fuel production profitable, or women's movements for women's equality in the workplace and protection in child rearing and childbirth, or other such movements. The sexual rights movement for trans people, for gay people, LGBTQIA people. Those are all ways of protesting the lack of support, but each group is separate. Another way the United States is dealing with this is the way they seem to deal with everything, through violence. Violence in mass killing and violence by police. In New York City, where I live, Eric Adams, our mayor, is wanting to cut libraries where people go to work on computers who can't afford a computer, where kids go to have a quiet place to do their homework and maybe even get some help on their homework, where people go who need a job and need to use the computer to get their job, where people go to get books. He wants to cut the libraries, cut preschool for disabled children. 10,000 children in New York are not getting the preschool education they need. And other cuts that are cuts against people, while he is funding and increasing the funding for the police force, which has one tool to solve problems, and that's force. 1,176 people last year were murdered by the police. Force doesn't always work, obviously. Why do we go there? Why isn't the United States more like France, where people are economically getting shafted because their pension age is... Macron, their very unpopular president, is trying to raise the age where you get a pension, particularly painful for women. They have to work 30 years to get a pension. However, women who take advantage of France's generous maternity leaves and take 5 years off while being paid by the government, that's still 5 years less for your pension. So that they want to raise the age and the amount you have to work is devastating for women who are parents. They're in the street. Over 4 million French people are in the street fighting that together. They're fighting it with their very strong radical unions. They're fighting it with their neighborhood organizations. They're fighting it with their climate organizations, with their racial and sexual justice organizations, together. Now, how can they do it and we don't? We just sit around. Why do Americans allow this? Why aren't we in the street as our rents are rising? The average one-bedroom apartment in New York City, where I live, is $4,000 a month. And Adams keeps adding to the amount that landlords are allowed to raise their rents. Wait a minute, what's happening? Why aren't we in the streets? Well, one reason is France was defeated by Algeria and gave up its empire. It doesn't spend anywhere near our $850 billion on war, on military. Now, it's true that after World War II, there was a movement in the United States to convert to a peacetime economy, but we never did. So we always need a war excuse to keep producing more, and we are the biggest arms sellers in the world. So it's very profitable for the military. That's one reason it continues. But if we don't put our money into the military, we have it there to use for our people. In France, they use that money for an excellent universal healthcare system. So healthcare is free. They have an excellent universal daycare system. Daycare starting at 3 years old is for everyone. 97% of kids 3 years old are in daycare. Before that, it's $1 an hour for an excellent daycare where you also get fed and you change into clean clothes at the daycare, so you get your clean outfit back, and you can be there from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. France has very powerful unions. The CGT is a communist trade union. They also have socialist trade unions who believe that the working class deserves everything, and they're out. And when they go on strike, they close the subway system, they close the electricity, they work together. Why do they have that and we don't? Well, one of the answers is American anti-communism. After World War II, when we were allied with Russia as our primary ally, when Joseph Stalin was referred to on the radio as Uncle Joe, because he was our ally. At the end of that war, the United States had to have an excuse to keep up war production, and so we began the anti-communist crusades. They kicked the communists out of the labor movement, communists and the socialists who were considered fellow travelers, and any leftist that was considered a fellow traveler. Communists were kicked out of many professions as well. And so the labor movement that had the spark of a vision of a labor-controlled government, that spark was extinguished. It was gone. They couldn't get away with that in France, as they couldn't in Germany either, because the resistance to fascism was organized by the communists. And so to then throw them out as unpatriotic just wasn't acceptable. Now, the United States had a Marshall Plan where it gave these nations money to rebuild, and one of the conditions was not allowing communists in their universities. So the communists that would have gone to university or were in universities went into the labor movement and created very powerful labor movements that join strikes, that join each other so no one can get away with denying one without denying all. So that our anti-communism was really, really a bad influence on the ability to change and to put labor in power instead of corporations bringing back their money from abroad and buying our political system. Plus, France and Germany don't allow any private money in politics. They have a limited time where people can run. They're not allowed to have paid TV or radio ads. They all get the same amount of ad time on television to talk about what they believe in. And that's it. They don't have what we do, where corporations are considered individuals and can give endlessly in political action committees. So they don't have the best democracy money can buy. They have a lot more leeway to get out in the street and protest with their strong unions joining them. Another thing that has held America back is our family system. In our family system, children are isolated, living with these omnipotent parents in individual nuclear families, where the parents have total power over you, where you have to obey the authority, or your life depends on it. We children learn because we have mirror neurons in our brains, and children have even more mirror neurons than adults that reflect the moods and feelings of our caretakers. We developed those because birth control until the 1800s was killing the kids you didn't want, or leaving them at the marketplace like kittens in case somebody wanted one, or by the side of the road. And so those of us who survived and were able to have children had plenty of mirror neurons to be able to sense when a parent is too angry for our survival. And American kids are isolated. French kids are all with other children from the time they're at the latest 3 years old. And they go through life with that group of children. And they develop strong bonds with those children. They eat together, they play together. Plus, France, like other countries all over Scandinavia, has subsidized or entirely free after-school programs and summer programs, which are quality programs that the overwhelming majority of children attend. So they're with other children and other people for most of their days. Also, there's a pediatric nurse at every daycare in France. And they have a public health system, and all their health examinations are at school. That's where they get their immunizations. That's where they get examined. That's where they get their vaccinations. And so, if a child shows damage, has bruises, black and blue marks, belt marks on its legs. The French system comes in, and if you have a child abuse history, if there's an incident of child abuse, a social worker is assigned to your family in the time that you're at home for 5 years' time. They're much stronger about caring for their children. The United States got new workers all the time with immigrants, stopping now, but they did. Whereas countries like France and Germany had to take care of their own people if they wanted a workforce for tomorrow. And they have a far better history about collectively taking care of children. Louis Althusser, a brilliant philosopher, had a philosophy of what keeps people down, and I think it's very true of the United States. The family, an authoritarian family, authoritarian religions, and authoritarian schooling. In the United States, 1 in 10 parents, according to a survey, so this is self-confession, confesses that they hit their children with objects to subdue them. Children learn from their omnipotent, dictatorially powerful parents. They learn the lines of dominance and subordination. They learn to obey authority. They're policed from the inside. They don't need cops and the army telling them how to behave and who to obey. They learn at their parents' knees. A second thing is authoritarian religions. In authoritarian religions, you need to bow down before the will of God as interpreted by the minister or the priest, who you have to obey. Because you are nothing, and God is everything, and they are God's interpreters on the earth. You also learn through authoritarian education, where you learn to shut up and obey. You don't ask the teacher embarrassing questions like, why are we doing this? It seems so stupid. Oh no. You learn to obey. I went to PS 81 after going to PS 9. I went to public school 81 in the Bronx. And we were not encouraged to question what we were learning and why. I might have asked, why are we learning about those Puritans, how important they were? Every year, that's boring. Why didn't we learn that 55 million Native Americans were murdered to establish America's primary, the colonists' primary status? Excuse me. Why didn't we learn about Bacon's Rebellion, where people who were slaves combined with bondspeople, because most of the people who came to the United States weren't the noble free settlers looking for religious haven. They were people either who were released from jail on condition that they come to the United States, their passage was paid by someone in the United States, and they were a virtual slave. They had to work for that person for 7 years as a bondsperson, and if they ran away, they were returned and had to serve more. Or why when they joined people who were rebelling against the colonial rulers in Virginia, why did they institute racism? So whites and blacks couldn't unite together, poor whites and black people who were the majority. We never learned anything about that. And if I asked about it, because somewhere I found out, I would be shut up. I really would. So that it's authoritarian education, which teaches you your job isn't to question. Your job is to obey and do what the teacher, the priest, your parents, the government says. So that's another reason why we don't have the spirit of rebellion that some other countries do. Now, what are we doing about it? Well, the most promising thing we're doing about it is we're joining unions. where people who are employees recognize they're an employee class and their work is enriching the employer, and they want a share of that labor, particularly after the pandemic when people were told they were essential and then were being cheated. So they are joining unions. The locomotive workers are planning to go out. That's over 100,000 workers. The UPS drivers, who often have to go to the bathroom in a bottle because they don't have the time. They're not allowed the time off to go to the bathroom. They're planning on going on strike. That's 350,000 of them. Universities that never were organized are organized. The 48,000 people working for the University of California system as tech assistants, as graduate student workers, as assistant professors, all of those jobs unified and went on strike together. And I think it was Martin Luther King, actually, who said, if you want equality, join a union. Right now, the Longshoremen's Union is getting ready to go on strike. And it was Martin Luther King's statements to the longshoremen when they integrated and therefore won strikes. Before that, blacks were used as strike breakers, so they always lost. But now they win, shutting down the ports because they're the ones doing the work. And Martin Luther came to the longshoremen and said the best way to create integration in this United States and to create a fair America is through unions, because they recognize that some people do the work and other people get the profit. That's an important thing. That's a real hope in the United States. And I think it's a hope that comes before not only unions, which are powerful, but a movement like France's movement, France Insoumise, French Unbowed, that unites all of the different movements into one movement for basic change, so there isn't any longer an employer class and an employee class. And that's what I hope we're getting through our interest in unions. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this program if you do. Thanking to you very much if you are contributing money, because we always need money. And getting in touch with us on www.democracyatwork.info, where you can hear about new programs, you can get merchandise, you can find out whatever is happening, and you can send in comments to me that I would really deeply appreciate your reactions, your comments. Thank you very much. Thanks. See you next week.